It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Brian Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan.
Bleiben wir auf Sendung in New York.
Da ist die Vermutung zu, hier sehen Sie das Flugzeug noch einmal von der Rückseite des Turms, an der Rückseite des Turms in dieses Gebäude hinein zu krachen und mit einer furchtbaren Explosion.
On this day, 17 years ago, a nation was attacked. They were attacked under the premise that they were different, that they went against a group of people's beliefs, and that death, hatred, grief, misery, and loss were the only redeemers that were expected to be necessary. No judge, no jury, no cause. A small group of people decided the fate of 2,996 others. They decided that the loss of their lives equaled the differences and the hatred that they felt towards them. I am not an American citizen, and I have no reason to be affected, much less care about what happened. I didn't have anyone who was there at the time, but I am a human being. I am a citizen of this world, and so are your friends and your family. None of us may be angels, and I'm sure neither were the people there that day. But nobody deserved to die. September 11, 2001, a Boeing 787 filled with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel crashed through the north side of the tower in New York City, leaving a gaping hole in its wake. A few minutes later, a second bird crashed on the South Tower, and a few more minutes later, another one hit the Pentagon, and another one crash-landed in Pennsylvania. The entire United States of America was brought to its knees. The whole world brought to tears with the fear of the same thing happening to them. Fear that undoubtedly lasted for decades. I was 5 years old at the time, and I didn't really understand a lot of it. I couldn't fathom the thought of someone having that much hate in themselves that they would direct it towards other people. I was filled with so much enthusiasm as a child that my puny brain could not process what had happened. As I grew older, I began to understand and process these emotions. I began to understand and grieve the loss. I began to feel the sympathy, the compassion, and most of all, the resilience of the people who were there at the time, helping, hoping for any survivor that would rise from the rubble. But one thing I still didn't understand to this day is the reason behind it. We have to remember that no religion, nationality, and race can be blamed for this event. It was hatred, nothing more than that. Hatred and intolerance. The type of negativity that radiates within themselves and which they can no longer contain, that they felt it necessary to direct it towards innocent lives. During the time of the crisis, people were able to hold hands and unite towards one goal. Americans used their collective spirits, despite this country being rocked to the core, to unite and stand up once more for those who have died and are suffering. International communities joined hands in aid of those affected. Political feuds and differing ideologies were put on hold that day. It was understood that the United States no longer stood as one nation, separate and sovereign from others. It was understood that the United States that day was simply a collection of people who were hurt and are suffering, in need of assistance. Humans, much like you and me, like everyone else in the world basically. Borders between nations were blurred. No longer was the United States alone to anyone, but was accepted as one like everyone else in the world. A nation which this type of tragedy is not deserving of. No one was deserving of this. That day, we ceased to become a world of different peoples and nationalities, but we became a world, period. One world, one humanity. In case you have forgotten, here's what that means.
Today, the Earth stood still. In London and Paris and Lisbon and Stockholm and Berlin, in cities great and small, in grand public squares, in offices and shops, in schools, everything stopped. In places where they too have suffered the pain of death by terrorism, in Belfast, in Lockerbie. And amidst the broader outpouring of sympathy, poignant gestures. These are firefighters in Budapest, saluting their fallen colleagues far away. These are stockbrokers in London. Until today, the words and gestures of support around the world had been largely official and diplomatic. Today, it got personal.
We're devastated. It's absolutely tragic.
And the sense of tragedy wasn't the only sentiment that was being shared with Americans.
Well, one's initial reaction is to just go and nail the bastards. Excuse the language.
The unity had another extraordinary expression today at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, where the Star-Spangled Banner began an emotionally charged memorial service. The Queen attended, and the great and the good of official London. But so did thousands of others, many Americans, many not. And thousands more outside jammed the streets around the cathedral. It was as close to America as you could get, especially if you couldn't get home.
You feel helpless being here because you can't, and not that there's much we could do at home, but it's just difficult.
They prayed in their multitudes in London and in Berlin, or they prayed alone, the Pope at his retreat outside Rome. Governments paused here too. Politicians stopped their arguments from Helsinki to Brussels. The European Union's leader Romano Prodi summed it up. In the darkest days of history, he said, America stood close by us, and today we stand close by America. And everyone here knows what that means.
Our objective will be to bring to account those who have organized, aided, abetted and incited this act of infamy, and those that harbor or help them have a choice, either to cease their protection of our enemies or be treated as an enemy themselves.
But it was the people who spoke loudest in their silence, and in Warsaw, in song. The liberties now threatened by terrorism are nowhere more appreciated than in Eastern Europe. The final word of the day, though, may have been uttered by a woman in Paris. Today, she said, we are all Americans. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
Never has there been a time in history, in modern history, that the world cried as one to aid those in need. America has been attacked with hatred, but the world responded with solidarity. Many of us might have forgotten, but we must always remind ourselves of the things that we can be in the face of adversity. No other idea mattered more than the fact that this should not happen in this society. No idea mattered more than the fact that we are all equals, and if we forget that, a tragedy such as this should not be needed to reignite that, because it will never be lost. It's in our nature to be compassionate. Borders and differences become imaginary and non-existent when we think of things like this. Imagine how unimportant things become when we simply think of others more than we think of the differences between you and me. We should always remember that what happened that day, tragic, but was not the cause of one religion as any others may think. It wasn't only the planes that were hijacked that day, but it was the religion of those people that were on the plane. Their religion was hijacked and bent into something so sadistic that it no longer represented its original form and values. Because I refuse to believe that a religion who believes in a supreme being that created this beautiful world and everything in and around it to be so evil and damning that it would purposefully want to hurt the same people that it created. Whoever it may be, God, Allah, or anyone else, is a representation of love and acceptance and nothing else. Our holy scriptures may say different things or the same things differently, but I know they all stand for unity and peace, and no peace would ever be present with hatred in each other's hearts. This was 17 years ago. A long time has passed since then. That event was proof that everyone in this planet can stand up and unite towards a goal that can really make a difference. That we can all unite and be one movement towards the betterment of this planet. We have to accept that differences will exist, in opinion, in form, in looks, but we have to be brave enough to accept those differences, even when it goes against our own beliefs. That is the true definition of respect. Changing minds and perceptions is not easy, but let's take it one step at a time and we'll get there. To the victims, the survivors, I stand here with you today for my beautiful country, the Philippines. And my hearts and thoughts are with you. I'm standing here letting you know that you have me and all of us to help you move further forward. In spreading the word and continuing your fight towards tolerance and love. And thank you so much for teaching us this valuable lesson. We will never forget what happened. We will never forget the tragedy, the cause, the event. But we will also never forget your legacy. We will never forget 9/11. Thank you.